I'll now call to order the October 21st, 2024 meeting of the Hayden Planning and Zoning Commission. Roll call.
Chair Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Erickson,
Here.
and Commissioner Gibson.
Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Erickson, would you like to lead us?
I would. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I see why I was put back here. Because now you guys can see the flag.
Do you have any additions or corrections to the agenda for this evening? No? No? Any conflicts of interest?
Nope.
Oh.
No? All right. We'll do the consent calendar, the approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from September 16th, 2024.
I'll motion that we approve the meeting minutes from September 16th, 2024 as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. All right, now we are on to the public hearing for PZE 20-0193 Battleground Subdivision Preliminary Plat. Lana, lead us off.
Do you normally read the procedures for the public hearing?
I don't.
Okay.
I didn't think about it.
Because usually, okay.
So it is a public hearing. I did notice we had a couple of stragglers come in, so if you have comments during the public hearing part, there's a green highlighted paper back there you need to fill out so that you can talk, okay? So this is the Battleground Subdivision, PZE 20-0193.
Go ahead.
All right, just making sure. So just to give us kind of an idea of where we're talking about, this is the southwest corner of West Hayden Avenue and North Carrington Street, most visibly noted by driving down Hayden Avenue and seeing the apartments on the left side. Those apartments are still a part of this 80-acre piece of property. And so today, the development team representing the project request is Ray Kimball from Whipple Consulting Engineers and Jakaya Cornett, Land Developer Director for Viking Construction. Peter, their attorney, had talked about coming, so he's listed on here, but he's not in the audience tonight. And then the owners of the project are Viking Construction. So just as a matter of what the request is, and a little bit of background recap, this is a multi-phase major subdivision to include 176 single-family residential lots, 2 commercial lots. One of those is vacant, and one of those has the 144 apartments, and there's one 12-acre park. And as this request comes forward, there was a great deal of follow-through with the background of this project. As you know, it has a 20 number in the front, which means that's the year that it came into the city and the application was identified. So it's vested under those codes. So that kind of gave you the forefront. And then why did it take so long to get from there to here? And that's also addressed all in that background. Mm-hmm. But as specific to this project, should it be approved, recommended for approval by Planning and Zoning and subsequently approved by City Council, has to follow the annexation agreement that's in place when it was annexed. It has a special use permit for the apartments, and any of those conditions that were tied to that also have to get addressed if necessary. And it has a deferred park agreement already in place, and any development of that parkland will have to be consistent with that agreement that's already there. And just as a matter of kind of looking, this is on page 15 of your staff review, and this is kind of how this looks. So as I said, There's 176 single-family residential lots being proposed. There's a park, 12-acre park. This is the 144 apartments that are already there. This is the one commercial lot. This is a lift station lot that's already there. And down here on the bottom, kind of where the road kind of goes around, that's a well site. The residential lots range in size from the minimum of 8,250 square feet to 22,102 square feet. The average size is 9,362 square feet. And then there's no individual access onto any of those exterior collectors. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ray, and he can pick it up from there. Only if I remember how to run PowerPoint.
Evening, Commissioners. Ray Kimball with Whipple Consulting Engineers for the record. Thank you for hearing me tonight. So I'm here representing Viking Construction. So that is probably the shortest presentation I've ever seen Donna give, so I'm pretty excited for that. But I do have 15 minutes that I'm supposed to kind of whip through all this here. So if there's something that I gloss over that you would like me to expound on at the end of this, please make sure you ask me some questions because I'll be happy to go in more depth. I will refer you to the application, all the materials in the packet for the vast majority of the record, but I do want to get through and highlight the majority of some of them. So as Donna said, this is the project location. You can see the apartments there on the north side. Dunkirk Avenue is dedicated, and you can also see right here that Carrington Avenue as well as Honeysuckle has already been dedicated. The right-of-ways for those have been dedicated. So the project zoning, you can see here that the northern part of the property is zoned commercial, which is why the apartments are there under the conditional use permit. There's also this small area right here that is, that's for the commercial lot. That's where the commercial lot is located. Everything south of there is zoned single-family residential. And there is, as you probably read in your packet, that the annexation agreement limits the entire property to 4 units per acre. And so that is why we have the apartments on the north side with 144 and 176 units in single family, which gets us to the 80 acres times 4, maximum density of 4 units per acre. So as you can see here in the site data table, there are 176 residential lots. The total area of those residential lots is 65, a little over 65 acres. The average lot area is 9,300 and change. The lot frontages vary from 30 to 76. There is a well lot down here in the southern portion here. And so that's an existing well. So that was the existing well that was used for irrigation. The Hayden Lake Irrigation District, which serves water to this property, would like that. They want to use it as a supply point for their water system. And so as part of that, we will be deeding that well to them, as well as granting the water rights. I think they already have the water rights. But you'll see that little circle down there around that, and that's a 50-foot wellhead protection zone. And what that is that's a requirement for public wells that 50 feet away from the wellhead, you have to protect it from things like stormwater injection wells, dry wells, sewer mains, septic systems, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And so right now we show that the road, Honeysuckle, we're kind of doing a little wowie to the south right around that. That's on purpose. And that is to make sure that any sewer in the road goes around that wellhead protection zone. If the case happens that the sewer does not need to go in Honeysuckle in that location, we will straighten that road out and not wowie it to the south. Mm-hmm. So, and that's an important thing to remember as we move forward. So we have some open space in the subdivision here. I've highlighted it in green. So we've got this is very intentional when we did our subdivision layout. We wanted to make sure that when we have this 12-acre community park in this location, that we provided open space tracks and trails to that park. So we wanted to make sure there were multimodal trails. There's a multimodal trail all along Honeysuckle, all along Carrington, so this is 10-foot wide. We have open space tracks along Dunkirk at the block end buffers. But in order to make sure that the people who live in these two loops have easy access and basically direct pedestrian access to the park, we wanted to make sure that they had that, so we cut in this 30 to 40-foot wide tracks right through the center here with a 10-foot pedestrian pathway in there. And that provides pedestrian access to the park for all the residents in those neighborhoods. And of course, we also have a 10-foot wide pedestrian pathway along the entirety of the south side of Robeson, which serves those pedestrian corridors. You can also see here, I overlaid the aerial of the apartments, so you can just see what those look like. And they've got a little playground, a park, and a pickleball court right here for their residents. And of course, this right here is the commercial lot. So the proposed streetscape is going to look very similar to this. This is the typical streetscape that we have in the city of Hayden. So we have street side swales, typical driveways, residential street. This is what a block end buffer would look like. So those block end open spaces with the trail next to them have a little bit wider open space tracks. With regards to the Coeur d'Alene Airport, it wasn't really talked about too much in the staff report, but I did want to bring up that the battleground our subdivision location is right here in green. It's kind of in that it's in the blue area, which is that area that they say that is the best area for us to have some sort of residential development. It's not in the direct flight path. So it's kind of in the armpit in between the two runways. So that's a good thing for us. But really what I go into, generally speaking, is the standards of approval. So as you all know, the requirements for a subdivision is we have to meet the standard of approval for every single standard laid out in city code. So that means we have to meet minimum lot standards. We have to make sure that there's roads, that there's sewer, that there's parks, and all of those items that are laid out in city code. And so what we do is I go through and it's going to seem a little monotonous, but I go through and here's the code, and this is how we meet it. I'm going to talk about how we meet it a little bit. That way we make sure we have record about, so you know and can feel confident and direct staff to write a reasoned decision that is supported by the record. So also to that end, as we talk about, and we'll get to this towards the end with regard to conditions of approval, all conditions of approval are supposed to be conditions that make an application more compliant with the code. And so if they're not necessarily responsive to the code, then they're not necessarily responsive to an application and probably shouldn't be applied. So the first standard of approval that we're vested under in the 2020 code, which is way back when, I know there's been a whole bunch of stuff, but we are vested under the 2020 code, and we are vested prior to the Imagine Hayden 2040, 2020 Transportation Master Plan, Parks Master Plan, all of those things. And so we kind of have to go a long ways back through all those documents, and you got them all in your packet, and I apologize that you had to read through all that because I'm sure there's a little bit of brain damage there, but I get it. So this first standard is infrastructure as construction will function in a manner that promotes public health, safety, and welfare. So first off, we're going to meet all City of Hayden construction standards for all projects. So everything, all the roads meet City of Hayden construction standards. Sewer meets City of Hayden construction standards. Water distribution meets Hayden Lake Irrigation District and DEQ standards. This promotes public health, safety, and welfare. There will be parks. Park will be constructed meeting health and welfare. And it is, in fact, and I'll talk about this later when it comes to the sewer. It's an orderly expansion of the sewer. This is a part of the city that doesn't have any sewer. And I'll speak to this a little bit more a little bit later here. So infrastructure needs to be constructed and located in an orderly manner, taking into consideration of co-location of other infrastructure. So we will be constructing the infrastructure such that all utility conflicts are avoided. And that's one of the reasons why we had that little wowie in Honeysuckle Avenue. And we make sure we have adequate space to provide, as shown on the preliminary construction plan submitted with the subdivision application. Now, when it comes to expanding city infrastructure in an orderly manner, the biggest part here is making sure that we construct the sewer system in a manner that makes sense. So this is an entirely unused sewer basin. So H8 sewer basin is a sewer basin that is not having any significant development in it. There's a small chunk of it that was developed on Robeson that has a temporary lift station that pumps into a different basin. As part of this application, I could probably talk about 10 years ago, as we were contemplating this entire application, the city of Hayden came to us and several of the other property owners in the area and asked, hey, this big sewer basin, if you guys want to do some development here, let's do a local improvement district. Let's talk about that. And what a local improvement district is, where the city decides that, hey, we're going to take all these landowners and all this land, and we're going to create a district where the city builds the infrastructure, and upon development, the developers and the building permits all pay it back. And everyone gets assessed an assessment to pay back that infrastructure. At that point in time, developers said, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. Well, what has happened in the meantime is that the 6 landowners in that half section have all gotten together, and there are 5 developers and the school district have gotten together, and the 5 developers have formed an LLC that is funded specifically to build this lift station. And so they've formed the LLC, they've funded the LLC. It is, the lift station is under design, so they're under conceptual design right now, and moving forward with that in anticipation of building this lift station. And so what it does is that it provides sewer for the entire H8 basin, which is an important part of the infrastructure and orderly expansion of the city of Hayden. And that'll pump directly to the treatment plant. And so there won't be any part of the H8 basin nothing in there is built today. And so it'd be completely brand new, right to the treatment plant, and it won't have any negative impact on any existing city infrastructure. So all infrastructure must be in compliance with the applicable city, state, and federal regulations. So provisions have to be made for water supply that satisfies DEQ and Northern Lakes Fire Department. Hayden Lake Irrigation District will be supplying water to this. They've issued a will serve letter, and all the design will meet their standards as well as DEQ standards. There'll be fire hydrants, fire flow will all meet Northern Lakes Fire Protection District requirements. Infrastructure provisions have to be made for public sewerage. I just talked about that. So we have the lift station that we'll be constructing, and the force main all the way to the treatment plant. Part of that's already built, the force main. And of course, like I talked about, it'll be funded by the consortium of landowners in the area. The school district has pitched in and said that they will provide the site for it. And so it's a big deal when it comes for the school district. They bought property right dead smack in the middle of nowhere, and they got a good price for it. And so what this is going to do for the school district, it's going to bring water, sewer, and roads right to their doorstep. And so the only cost for them is a little half-acre site in the corner of their property, and that's what they get for it. So it's a great deal for the school district. They're really excited about it. Moving forward, provisions have to be made For snow storage, this is one of the things that we work diligently with the city engineer about. So the city plows, they hate cul-de-sacs and they hate knuckles because it takes them a long time to plow them. And so what we did is we took those all out. And so now the plow just whip right around the street, just like normally would. They don't have to slow down to hit any knuckles and create the piles in the middle or do those little weird snow storage things off to the side. So that's a big deal for the city plowing department, or the city street department for snow removal. So, we have to make provision for stormwater systems. These are gonna be very straightforward. This is all, the typical, DEQ approved street side swales and dry wells. We see them all over the city of Hayden, all over the Raft and Prairie, in fact. Very, very common way of treating and disposing of stormwater. So we have to make sure that these streets are consistent with the adopted transportation master plan. Of course, this is the transportation master plan that's adopted at the time of application, although the standards really haven't changed. So what does that mean? We don't have any cul-de-sacs because we wanted to avoid those. And of course, we talked about the honeysuckle, the well lot there and how it goes around the well lot. Carrington will be built to a 24-foot wide standard that allows half width, that allows two-way traffic. Robeson will be built to the Transportation Master Plan standard, which is 28 feet, curb to curb. Honeysuckle will be a half width, same 24 feet, unless we end up working some deal with the school district where we build the whole thing out. And of course, Hayden Avenue with the construction of the apartments was already built to its half width, and that covers those things. So, making provision for parks and open space. So this is a big one. This goes back many, many years, back to the Carrington subdivision, Carrington Meadows subdivision, where the city's park master plan showed some regional park, or I guess community park in the vicinity. And there was a requirement at the time of the Carrington Meadows subdivision where any subdivision over 40 acres had to dedicate 10% open space for a park. The city has since changed that code, but as part of that subdivision, Viking worked a deal with the city, came to an agreement with the city where Viking would dedicate a park in this subdivision, would build and dedicate a park. The park agreement has provisions in it where a portion of the park is purchased by the city using impact fees. It's purchased at a rate that is ridiculously below market value. So the cost per acre is somewhere in about a third of what today's market value is. The rest will be donated by Viking. And then in order to avoid I don't know if any of you remember the Broadmoor Estates debacle where they dedicated a park in the middle of the subdivision and it never got built, and it wasn't built, it was weeds and well after the last house was built. And I don't know how many years it took of people complaining to city council before they got the funding to turn it green. As part of this agreement, the park will be seeded, irrigated, and amenities will be built until the funding for the park impact fees that are set aside for it runs out. So basically what we're going to do in this case is we're going to prepay all of the impact fees for every single one of these lots by building the park and building as many improvements in the park as we can on the front end. So as opposed to typically with impact fees, you pay it with every building permit. And then once all those building permits, all those fees have been collected, then the city has to go put together a park project, put it out to bid, and then get it built. This happens opposite. It's on the front end, much better for the city, much better for the residents. And in this case, I think we can get a lot more built per dollar, dollar for dollar, just because it's cheaper for us when we put it out to bid. Don't have to go through the public works process, which just adds a lot of cumbersome and a lot of dollars. So we do have the block-in greenways. As I talked about, we have this little park strip, which provides really nice pedestrian connectivity everywhere. So with regards to the city parks plan compliance, this is the old parks plan. So you can see what I've done is we've superimposed our subdivision right in here. It's a little weird looking, but you can see that their little green blob here is this little irregular linear greenway. And then we have these proposed linear along Hutter and along Prairie. Whole idea is to get people on pathways, out of neighborhoods to the parks. And so we very intentionally designed the subdivision like that. We didn't put the park, we didn't surround it all around by a whole bunch of homes. We could have done that, but we didn't. We had a couple layouts where that was like that, but we very intentionally changed the layout so that there's 10-foot pathways all the way around the park. There's pathways, 10-foot pathways leading up and down Carrington to the park and east-west on Robeson to the park. So it's very, very easy for the community to, from this neighborhood and any adjoining future neighborhoods to get to the park. It was really, really important. And that's what we very intentionally designed the park and laid out the park so that that would happen. So we have to make provision for erosion control and geohazard stabilization. Of course, it's Rafton Prairie. There isn't a whole lot of erosion issues out there. It's all gravel. And geohazards there aren't any on site. So it's very straightforward. There are parts of City of Hayden that do have geohazards. They're typically located on the northeast portion of the City of Hayden. This out over the prairies, there's no geohazards. So we'll do an erosion control plan, make sure there's dust control and all that good stuff during construction. That's pretty standard there, at that standard of approval. So we also have to make provision for gas, power, telecommunications, and similar. So Vista will be providing power and gas. And telecommunications, there's a whole bunch of telecommunications companies out there. There's fiber and whatnot. So they'll all have the opportunity to get in the ditch and make sure they get their utilities in. So make sure we've got provisions for driveway locations that take into consideration the width and location relative to snow storage, utility boxes, crosswalks, adjacent roadways, mailboxes, and the like. So all lots will be accessed from the local streets. So typical driveway layout, no access from Carrington, no access from Honeysuckle, none from Robeson, none of the collector streets, no driveway access off of those, just driveway access off of the internal streets. And of course, we take into consideration with our design where the driveways go so they don't, center punch mailboxes, things like that. So is the proposed subdivision zoned for the proposed use and does it conform to other requirements of the code and the zoning code? So every single lot meets the minimum lot standards. So so it meets 8250 minimum. The commercial lot, of course, doesn't have a lot minimum standard. And the apartments with a special use permit, apartment lot with special use permit, meets all the special use permit standards. Where residential density, inside just the single family density, not including the apartments, is 2.7 units per acre. If you include the apartments, we're 4.0. So we have to make sure that the development has made adequate plans to ensure the community will bear no more than its fair share of costs for development, right? So that's impact fees, right? So typically speaking, impact fees, and this is the beauty of impact fees. So impact fees were created or envisioned to catch the small projects that fall between the gaps, okay? So, and what do I mean by that? So a 17 lot subdivision on 5 acres, if we do a traffic impact analysis for that, there's no measurable impact, okay? We do 10 of those that equal 170 lots, the cumulative impact is measurable. But when you do them at one at a time, it's really, really hard to catch that impact. And so a traffic impact analysis for a 17 lot subdivision is gonna say, nope, no impact, don't worry about it, build it, keep going. So impact fees catch that. They catch those small ones and they treat every lot the same, no matter if it's a 170 lot subdivision or a 17 lot subdivision, they keep them all the same. So, but we also have to do an impact study because our subdivision is big enough. We have to make sure that, hey, make sure you're not doing anything crazy or impacting something crazy over here, or over there, that needs to be dealt with that wouldn't necessarily fall under the typical auspices of the city's capital improvement plan. And so we've done a traffic impact analysis. The city staff is reviewing it. There are some impacts, okay? We kind of expect that. And so what are we gonna do? We're gonna mitigate them. So what we're gonna do is our plan is to, instead of paying impact fees, is that we will mitigate our traffic impact by building the infrastructure necessary to do that mitigation. So does that mean traffic signals? I think it'll mean a traffic signal. And I don't think we're gonna do a roundabout, probably 2 traffic signals. And then the one's gonna be, we're gonna work at signalizing Hayden and Hutter with a span wire signal, and Hayden and Carrington. So the way we look at doing that is, so obviously Hayden and Hutter is an existing deficiency, right? It's already broken. I don't think anyone in the city knows or says otherwise. So impact fees, as you're probably well aware, aren't supposed to fix already broken intersections. Can't break it anymore, but you're not supposed to fix anything, or not supposed to be used to fix already broken infrastructure. So what we'll be doing is we'll work with the city and city staff to put together, and city attorney, to put together an agreement that works out the traffic mitigation. And what we'll do is essentially just like the parks thing, we'll build the infrastructure, and instead of paying the impact fees, we'll just build the infrastructure all the way up to the amount that we would have paid for impact fees. There's probably about a 70 cents on the dollar savings to the city when we do it, just from the standpoint of the private developer dollars go a lot. They go a lot further. Let's just face it. That's just the reality. The cumbersomeness, is that a word? I don't know. How cumbersome it is for a city to put together a set of plans, put it out to bid for public bid, have to take the low bidder. That entire process takes a lot of effort. It happens after every single home in the subdivision is built, not before. Lots of times it happens years after, so it's problematic in that regard. And also prices seem to creep. So as we all know, inflation happens. And so as prices rise, those dollars don't go as far. But if we get the infrastructure done and installed now, so in the early phases of the project, then it fixes the intersections, and it's a savings to the city. It's a benefit to the residents of the city. It's also a benefit to the developer, because let's face it, no one wants to have a project where brand new homeowners can't get in and out of their homes. So There's a benefit everywhere. So that brings us to the conditions of approval. So conditions 6, 7, and 9. I'm going to back up just a little bit here and go back to one of the, yeah, that'll work. So part of this right here is the H7 lift station location. H8 lift station is going to be down here in this corner. Okay, the right about here or so is the dividing line between those two basins. So conditions 6, 7, and 8 all talk about no COs for any of the lots in this subdivision until the H8 lift station is built. And we think it would be appropriate to add some language to those conditions. Get to it here. That says that the lots within the H7 sewer basin are not subject to that condition. So if the lots don't sewer to the H8, there's no reason to hold up COs or building permits for lots that don't go into that sewer basin. So we request that change. Condition 8, we request the removal of this condition. And that has to do with the alignment of Downing. So Downing is a north-south local, it's a local street that's supposed to be, it's just a little bit wider, and it's supposed to act as kind of a backage road to Hutter. It's it's planned for essentially the west side of our property. The subdivisions that are planned for the west side have accounted for it. And we have an agreement, we have circulated an agreement that is, and we've submitted that to the city, that speaks to all of the developers, all the landowners have agreed that they will align their streets to the previously approved subdivisions next to them. So that if Downing is got an alignment in one location, everyone has agreed that they will line up their streets with that. And so, that's a really important thing because it makes sure that there is orderly development of the infrastructure for Downing. And that's really important. We've all agreed to that. It's something that we do already. That's typically what we do. If there's an existing street or a planned street and an approved subdivision right next door, we hook into it. That's what we do. And all of the landowners have agreed to that. And just like with the lift station, they've agreed to work together to make sure that the right-of-way and the easements are necessary or are there when the time is right to build Downing. So because of that, we are requesting the removal of condition number 8 because it's already done. It's already been satisfied. Condition 12A1, we request removal of this condition because Carrington Street has already been dedicated. So the annexation agreement, the requirement in the annexation agreement for the dedication of Carrington was to be triggered by the first development on the property. That was the special use permit. Before we got the first CO, certificate of occupancy for the apartments, we had to dedicate the right-of-way for Carrington. That is the same for Honeysuckle Avenue. We also had to dedicate the right-of-way for Honeysuckle. And so there's enough right-of-way there today to build the half section, get 2 lanes of traffic in there. And of course, if we work a deal with the school district on the south, where we build the entire width of Honeysuckle, we'll deal with that at that point in time and make sure it's designed and the right-of-way is dedicated by the school district, but that'll be a separate thing with them. So that's why we're requesting the removal of conditions 12.1A and 12A1 and 12D1. Now 12D2 speaks to a 30-foot green belt. And so The 30-foot greenbelt tract, this is straight out of the code. It is to be provided in subdivisions located along the frontage of those streets delineated within the city's transportation plan as having a 30-foot landscape buffer. So the code for the greenbelt tract sends us over to the transportation master plan. So this is the transportation master plan, and this is in your packet as well. So the little dashes right here is the 30-foot landscape buffer on each side of the road. That indicates which streets that landscape buffer is supposed to be on. So the code sends us to the transportation master plan. Transportation master plan has a map that says that these are the locations where we have this 30-foot buffer. That 30-foot buffer, as you can see here, is on Atlas Road. So that's where the little hatching is. It is not on Carrington or Honeysuckle or Robeson or on Hayden. So we have provided pathways along all those streets. So we have 10-foot wide pathways, important to get pedestrians around, but not providing the 30-foot green belt. And with that, I'll answer any questions you got.
Yeah, I do. Did you want to start on one end and move down?
Joel, do you have any?
Ray, can I ask one question
Joel
first?
doesn't,
just-
I don't either.
Just for clarification.
Keith, please, do you have any questions down there?
Oh, wait a minute.
So,
Colin is asking.
Commissioners, I have a clarifying question first. On your request to add the language to, let me get back to it here. 8, or it's like 7 and 9, where you say the H7 lots are not subject to this requirement. My
Right.
concern is you have a phase development with phase 1 starting on the south end. Can you speak to that?
I can.
That'd be great.
So we do have a phase development with the first phase starting on the south end. And
That graphic is found on page 26 of your staff review.
Thank you.
so first phase is down in this direction. We fully expect that our first phase is going to coincide with the design and construction of the H8 lift station. So that's something we expect. If there are unexpected delays. So right now, it has taken longer than we expected to it's taken a lot longer than we expected to get through the approval process, really to actually get off the starting blocks for this. The city's consultant has been reviewing our sewer master plan. It's been into the city for over a year. So we have a sewer basin master plan that's been into the city. It's been, quite frankly, it's been languishing. And so the city's consultant has it now. They're supposed to be reviewing it. The development consortium, the consortium of developers have paid for the city's consultant to review it. And so as soon as that, and what they've asked us to do, believe it or not, they think they may want it smaller than what the master plan pays for or says it's supposed to be. Because our density based on our sewer master plan, so our density is less than that than is contemplated by the sewer master plan. Sewer master plan in Imagine Hayden took into account sewer densities or development densities that were envisioned by the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan has a lot of mixed-use development in this area. It has commercial development, quite a bit higher density in this area. We have annexation agreements that limit the density to 4 units per acre, and so it's quite a bit less. So the lift station is probably going to get a little bit smaller. To be quite honest, we didn't care. Ready to build you a bigger one. But as it turns out, that's a little problematic from the infrastructure standpoint, because the bigger the lift station, the bigger the pumps, more electricity it costs to run them. And so they want to make sure that they get the size right. I get that, I understand. So, back to the point, back to the question. So it has taken us a lot longer than we thought it should to get us to this point where we're still not even out of the starting blocks. We're on the starting line, we're on the blocks. We're not out of the gates yet. So, there very well could be an opportunity for us to build this area right here as our first phase, because it already has sewer that goes to the 8-7 lift station. And so that's why we are asking for that, in case we need to switch gears to just move from one to the other. And the reason we had the phasing plan starting down here is because we were expecting the H8 lift station to be built and operational coincident with our first phase, with the timing of everything. So far, it's kind of lagged a little bit. So, and why would we, so we can't build the H8 lift station and then start a phase over here in this direction, because we have to build the sewer down to the lift station. And so you don't go buy a whole bunch of empty field, you don't build sewer through an empty field in order to get to some lots on the very north end. So that's why we were gonna start on the south end. That's why the phasing plan shows the lots in the south end as being the first phase. If in case the lift station lags a little bit, then the lift station will be the second phase. And we'll just do the first phase up here, which is why we were requesting that the H7 basin lots not be included. That way, we can actually get moving, get a little bit of momentum in the subdivision prior to the lift station, H8 lift station getting built. So it's just that simple.
I just thought if you explain that, it might clear up some confusion.
Yes, thank you. I've been living this for many years now, 4 years now, so it's all in my head and all makes a lot of sense to me. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense to you, and in 15 minutes are really hard to convey that. So thank you.
Related
There's
to
a bunch
that,
of other
isn't
questions.
the park supposed to be completed by the end of phase 2?
There are some triggers in the parks agreement that talk about the phasing of that. And so I believe the park, I think this is the first phase, is right now in this vicinity. And so that will include the construction of Carrington all the way down and the construction of Honeysuckle all the way across, and these lots in this vicinity, which would include, and I think phase 2 completes this right here. So if we were to do this as the first phase, then we do this as the second, this is the third, I don't think that would mess up the construction of the park. So,
So the H8 lift station is the part of land that the school district donated, and that's where you guys are going to build it, which would be the top left corner there.
yep, it'll be right in this vicinity.
Okay. Cool.
So regardless of where you phase it, if you still have to abide by the parks agreement that you've made currently, whatever phase you call it, it still has to go by that parks agreement, is that correct?
That's correct. We have an agreement with the city, we're gonna stick to it.
Who owns the land on the southern side of Honeysuckle, on the other side of that well?
This area right here?
Yeah.
Coeur d'Alene School
It's the
District.
school, and
School
so
district does.
that's already been deconflicted if the road has to,
Yeah,
down a
if
little
the road has to go south, we've got a verbal confirmation
Yeah,
from them.
they're aware of that.
Yeah, they're so excited to actually get roads and sewer to their property and,
Right.
and water. It's a big deal.
yeah.
So they're very, they don't want to write a check, but they're happy to dedicate land that they're already going to have to dedicate anyway.
Yeah.
So not that big of a deal there.
So Donna still has presentation to do, but if you have questions for the applicant, now's the time.
Yeah, I have questions for the applicant. So I'm looking at your map and the coloring, so I want to make sure that I'm correct in assuming that the lot the track that the wellhead is on, that is all green space? No structures going to be put on that?
That'll be owned by the Hayden Lake Irrigation District. And so it'll be available for, they typically landscape their stuff. So no structures other than the well house, I'll say that. So it's not a residential lot, it's a well house lot.
Okay, so I'm assuming you're gonna have an HOA,
There will be.
so are they gonna be okay who's gonna handle that lot then?
Typically, Hayden Lake Irrigation District would maintain their own lot.
So is it the entire track right there, is that in the entire lot, or just the 50-foot,
It would be this rectangle
that
right
whole
here.
part?
Yep.
Okay, that's what I was
Yes.
wondering
Yeah.
about, thank you.
That would be Hayden Lake Irrigation District's responsibility.
Okay. What is the plan for the commercial lot up here in the upper right corner of this slide?
Plan is to sell it for the highest price humanly possible.
Nice.
Okay.
There's nothing other than that.
I didn't know if the topography was such that it was going to be buildable.
Oh, yeah, it's flat.
Okay.
It's flat-ish.
Okay,
So it's completely buildable, absolutely.
but whatever's put there will still protect the area of the H7 lift station,
Yeah, the H7 lift station property is owned by the city, it's fenced off.
okay?
So, yep, no issues there.
Okay. So I had written some questions about stormwater and snow storage. So the stormwater isn't within the swells.
Correct. It'll be in the city right of way, street side swales,
What about snow storage?
same thing.
So they'll be able to push onto those?
Yep,
Okay,
yep, just like everywhere else in the city, every typical subdivision. That was one of the things where we worked with city staff about making sure we eliminated those knuckles, because we actually had knuckles, here, here, we had all in those little locations, every single spot there. And we got rid of those so that the plows could just whip right through those radiuses and just plow the snow out instead of having to have snow storage areas.
well,
So,
it's better for the city, but it's also better for the residents.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then there are several studies that are referenced in this packet that we got. And some of them are some of them have been updated, but they were updated like in 22. So my concern is, for instance, the traffic study, so much has changed and will change by the time that's fully built out. Is the traffic study going to be updated prior to you taking measures to mitigate an older traffic study?
Yes,
That's
so
my concern.
we submitted a traffic impact analysis in July of this year.
24?
Yes, it's updated, and I believe it's got a 20-year horizon on it, so it looks out 20 years,
Okay.
so.
And then, okay, I think I'm good.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
You did a very good job of hitting the standards of approval, and I appreciate that, because that's what I was looking for, was to see what you were doing to satisfy each of those. So I appreciate your presentation.
That's my goal. Well, I mean, I do sit on the planning commission for the city of
Yeah,
Post Falls, so.
I could tell. I could tell that.
Keith, do you have any questions?
I don't.
David, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay.
I've got a couple questions.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, so you're proposing a traffic light at Carrington, is that correct?
So the traffic study indicates that there's some traffic control mitigation necessary at Carrington Hayden.
Okay.
So there's some talk back and forth as whether that should be a roundabout or a traffic signal. My personal philosophy, having designed both, and knowing what a roundabout costs, so a two-lane roundabout on a cross-section like that. So I just designed, so a year ago, I designed the roundabout on Prairie Avenue in Zoros, kind of right out by the old Jacqueline Farm, right in front of there.
Yep,
So, you may hate it, I'm sorry if you do.
love it.
But that was developer cost, a $980,000 roundabout. Okay, a span wire traffic signal is $400,000.
Ongoing maintenance is less.
Ongoing maintenance, it depends on how many, there's a debate there. But the $500,000 worth of maintenance there's a long ways there. And when it comes to utilizing traffic impact fees and getting the most bang for our buck, those are some of the decisions that we try to make. So as engineers, working with city staff, we understand that, city staff has got the long-term aspects in mind. We get that, we understand that, we respect that. When it comes to the initial outlay and making sure that we get the most bang for our buck, because let's face it, City of Hayden's budget for capital improvements is pretty small. Tax base isn't quite there to fund a lot of the projects that probably need to be funded that are already broken. And so getting creative and utilizing partnerships with developers in order to get some of these things, get a little creative and get these things dealt with and taken care of. So Hutter and Hayden is a good example. Carrington, Hayden's gonna be another one. These are options these are opportunities for us to work together and really, we always, as a development community, we have to remember that every single one of our customers is gonna be one of your taxpayers. So they're gonna become a citizen of the city of Hayden, and it matters. And so providing a good quality place for them to live, with adequate infrastructure, not, in years past, we always kicked the can down the road. And I think now it's a good opportunity for us to put a foot forward and work together with the city where we can say, yeah, we can work on these things. We can work with staff and to get, a 60, 70 cents on the dollar, get something built. And so there's significant savings there for the city versus, saving up impact fees for 10 or so years. And meanwhile, the traffic gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And doesn't get fixed until that point in time. It's way easier to get in front of it on the front end. And that's what we're proposing to do.
So that light then would be a permanent light?
Yeah.
Not a temporary, because I know the master transportation plan doesn't show a light at Carrington, it shows one at Hutter and one at Atlas.
Right, it does. It shows one at Hutter, it shows one at Atlas. That is a traffic signal there is it's a cost-effective method of dealing with the traffic issues, and they're easily expandable.
Okay, well, and the reason for my question is because we had a member of Carrington come in complaining that the park wasn't gonna be built and it was gonna be built across the street. So this will have pedestrian crossing to allow them to come across to access the park?
Right.
As opposed to having to drive?
Right, and
Okay.
that's I saw that comment, I heard that person, and they have an 1 acre park in their little subdivision there.
Yeah.
That's owned by their HOA. And the whole purpose of this 12 acre community park being where it is now is that the plan in Carrington was for us to use the very north end where so next to the Harps treatment plant for that park, which is not ideal. But it was the industrial zone land that didn't have as much value as the residential zone land. So the plan was, okay, we'll put 8 acres of park up there. City can use impact fees and develop it. That was the initial thought. That was the initial plan. That kicked off an entire discussion about combining the two properties together, doing a deferred park agreement where it went down, and it was a long negotiation, and it was a long drawn out process, and the winner is everybody. So the city of Hayden gets a 12-acre community park at, I think if we're, the total, well, land cost is, if you include the donated part, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like $15,000 an acre. It's ridiculously low. Residential land right now goes for over $100,000 an acre, raw land. So 200,000 in some locations. So the cost savings just in land acquisition to the city is amazing. And it works for us too, because we max out our density, we get a cool park. It's in a great location. It's not sticking up, it's on next to the Harbs land application area. It's a good thing.
One last question.
Yep, happy.
So if you already have all the documentation in place for the Downing Lane and Honeysuckle and for 12A1 and 12D1, why would you want it removed?
There's some really awkward language in that condition that indicates that prior to any development, that we would have to go to the neighbor and have them dedicate the right-of-way across property that we don't own. And so we have an agreement with them that when they're ready, they'll build it on that alignment. And that was really what staff's concern was, well, so they have had, and I'm probably guilty of it, developers, engineers come in and say, why'd you let that guy put it right there? That's dumb, now I have to tie into it. I hate that, that screws up my idea. And so in order for them to not have people like me show up at their doorstep and say, I don't like the way that is designed and the way they laid that out, we just came up with the solution that we'll all agree that we're going to tie into the roads previously approved by the city. And I have the unique position to be doing the design for 3 of the 5 developers. So, and I'm working closely with the other engineers for the other developers so that we're actually all working together. It's one of those really cool things where it hasn't happened in the past, but it's happening now where we're all just working together to make sure that we get the best product out there. And so it's, the language in that condition is really cumbersome because it puts the entire project in the hands of a neighboring property the way it's written. And so as much as we thought, well, we didn't think that's appropriate. We did put together an agreement where we said, hey, let's just agree that we'll tie into each other's road systems. That's not a big deal. We already plan on doing it anyway. Everybody agreed to it, including the attorney who owns one of the projects. So, I mean, when John Magnuson.
I was gonna say, not me,
No, but when John Magnuson, who's one of the premier land use attorneys in the area, says, yeah, no problem. It carries a lot of weight, at least in my mind, so.
Oh, I had one more actually, sorry. Road developer agreement with Post Falls,
Yep,
that was in their letter.
that was in their letter.
Yeah.
We are okay with entering into a road development agreement for any required infrastructure in their right-of-way. That's what we have to do anyway with them. That's generally speaking, that's not something that necessarily needs to be a condition of approval because we're in their jurisdiction. So we have to do we have to work with them to do what we have to do. You know, I think you probably saw in your packet that the east side of Carrington, there's an existing right-of-way there. There's 20-foot strip that was dedicated as part of the Hayden Lake irrigated tracts back in 1911, I think. So never opened as a roadway. It's existed since then. The highway district has never accepted it as an open roadway, but because it is a right-of-way within their district, it is in their jurisdiction. So they have control over it. In all honesty, I think it was probably a little bit of an oversight that when these properties were annexed, that it wasn't annexed with them. I, as a consulting engineer, without, separate from my clients, have told the highway district that I would prepare all the documents for them free of charge to annex that into the city because it makes sense. It's a 20-foot strip of land, no man's land, that is completely surrounded by the city of Hayden. It completely makes sense for it to be in the city of Hayden. No one wants to take that first step and dip their toe in the water to start the process. It's not that big of a deal. Told them I'd do everything for them to move it forward. So hopefully that process will be in front of you guys in the future. But again, that's, if it isn't, and we have 2 feet of our roadway leaking into that 20 feet of right-of-way, we have to work into a development agreement. This one in particular, we have a development agreement with the highway district for Robeson. You probably saw that in there where we're doing an overlay pavement overlay on Robeson, all the way out to Gianna Estates. And that's a separate agreement with them that we're already committed to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Perfect. Reserve my time for rebuttal.
So you're going to find that I'm going to refer you to your staff review, and I'm going to refer you to your executive summary throughout this whole process. So everybody's got their ability to get to those documents electronically, or you've got your printed copies, take a pick. So standards for subdivision approval at the time that this application came forward identified that the applicant has demonstrated to the satisfaction of the city engineer and the responsible agencies that all existing and proposed infrastructures meet or can be constructed within 2 years after the date of city council approval of the master development agreement, which approved the preliminary plat to meet the following standards. So the engineer's memo is kind of addressed throughout the staff analysis, but the engineer's memo itself can be found on page 115 of the staff analysis. And the public agency comments start on page 120, plus the 4 that I gave you tonight.
And Donna, just for clarification of the record on the 4 that you gave tonight, I did consult with the applicant to make sure that they were okay with proceeding after reviewing those comments, and they agreed to proceed.
Thank you. And I have to explain why they came in kind of late. This project came in before we have our current BSNA municipal software. So when 2020 came in, it was put in, and the comments were put in a certain location. And then we've noticed this to agencies, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And so those comments have come in 3 different locations in the electronic file. And so it was just inadvertent. They were referred to throughout, but they weren't attached. So again, I apologize for that. So with respect to standard number 1, as I said earlier, you have a pretty lengthy background and explanation of how we got here in the first portion. And then the standards of approval analysis begins on page 7 of your staff review. Infrastructure can be constructed to function in a manner that promotes public health, safety, and welfare. We did identify that Post Falls Highway District provided comments related to road connectivity, road development agreements, and how that would all work. They did review the initial stab at the transportation impact analysis. And then they reviewed a bit of the second one, but the one that was updated in July, but it hasn't been all the way through the peer review process. And so there's a little bit of back and forth still happening as it relates to potential off-site or on-site transportation mitigation. And the Northern Lakes Fire Protection District provided comments. So they have this quirky little piece of code in the fire department, or the fire code, that identifies that you have to have 2 ways in and out of a subdivision if you have more than 30 dwelling units. And the City of Hayden code has that same kind of caveat. The fire code identifies that you have to provide for that so that at some point in the future that connectivity can occur. Our code is pretty specific that you have to have the other way figured out by 31. And so effectively they can build and then provide that either with a temporary access to create that second way out or not. And that's all reviewed at the time of construction plan review. And so you'll see that follow-up email in your comments back and forth with the fire department that says that they were fine with the layout as it's proposed for this subdivision. Then the infrastructure, can it be put in the ground and built in an orderly manner that accommodates that ongoing maintenance? And I think Mr. Kimball did a good job explaining that. You'll also see that throughout the rest of the staff analysis. So standard number 3 talks about many things. So, have you provided water supply system that satisfies the city, the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality, and Northern Lakes Fire Protection District? Have you provided public sewer systems that meet all of the agency requirements, HARBS, DEQ, and the city? Have you provided for snow storage? Have you provided for stormwater? Have you provided for streets that are consistent with the adopted transportation plans as amended, the transportation element of the adopted comprehensive plan is amended, and that satisfies the city ITD, adjacent jurisdictions, local highway district requirements? And have you provided for parks and open space that are consistent with the adopted parks master plan as amended and that satisfies the city's requirement? So that's a pretty big hunk. So will serves where letters were provided for the water by Hayden Lake Irrigation District in July of 20, and then they updated it in March of 24. The Idaho Department of Water Resources and Hayden Lake Irrigation District identified that well site and they wanted to preserve and protect it. Northern Lakes Fire District had construction requirements in September of 20 and updated them in 24. Will serve letters for sewer were provided by the city in August of 20 and updated in 24. And as Mr. Kimball noted, this project site is located in the H7 and H8 sewer basin, kind of split. This basin, in the history of the basins, you saw that it was all one basin, and then they did a sewer tech memo, and they made it H7 North and H7 South. And then with the update to the sewer master plan, it's called H7 and H8. So it's a kind of long-running conversation. And then the snow storage and the stormwater are both reviewed at the time of construction plan review in accordance with Title 8. In the lift station conversation, we've kind of denoted an area that's kind of over here on the school district property, plus or minus. And that's why you'll see those conditions in there. We have to have permanent access to wherever the lift station finally lands. And to be fair, the sewer tech memo that Mr. Kimball did note isn't finished, and so we don't know where that lift station is going to land at the end of the day. We all recognize that at some point, if they come off of Honeysuckle, you want to build that road typical so that it may or may not make sense to build it to the full typical section. At the end of the day, we have to make sure that we have permanent access to this lift station meeting the access requirements. Street names and addressing shall be reviewed by the city at the time of final plat review, and that's because street names that go on preliminary plat sometimes take long enough to get approved and final platted that by the time they go forward, there's a duplicate street name. And we've always strived, whatever, to not have any duplication of street names so that people aren't confused as to where they're going in case of an emergency. The annexation agreement identified roadways within the 2007 Transportation Strategic Plan for dedications of right-of-way and typical sections. This is vested under the 2013 plan. And in your staff analysis, you'll see a summary of how those are kind of related. Let me see if I can find it. On page 16. It'll show you the annexation typical and the annexation right-of-way. It'll talk to you about the vesting typical section and the vesting right-of-way. And then it'll talk to you about what today's typical is and the right-of-way of today. And the two roads that Mr. Kimball is identifying with Carrington Street and Honeysuckle, if you note that 85 feet is the vesting right-of-way for the whole right-of-way width. For Carrington and for Honeysuckle are nearly synonymous. So I don't have really any too big of an angst to remove those two conditions that he's requesting 12A1 and 12D1 related to that.
What about 12D2?
Pardon me?
What about 12D2?
We'll get there, hold that thought. So the dedications were completed as part of the apartment development because that was what it was identified, any development, whether it was subdivision or building, that those dedications had to occur. But it also identifies in section 5 of the annexation agreement that the applicable standards are those at the time development construction commences, which is interesting language, not necessarily at the time that the application came forward, which is why we did this chart to show that it's so similar all the way across. The transportation impact analysis that was completed as part of the special use permit was completed in 2019. And for many of the reasons that Vice Chair Howard identified, that seemed really old, 5 years worth. And that many of the assumptions that occurred in that some of them have been the same and some of them have changed. So we wanted to make sure that that was current for today. So the developer did provide an updated TIA in July of 2024. And knowing that this was coming forward, it did go to peer review. We're anticipating those results back any day, but they just didn't make it time for today. So should the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of this subdivision to the City Council, staff suggests that a separate cost share and proportionate reimbursement agreement be entered into as a condition of the subdivision approval and prior to construction plan submittal. And the reason that it's prior to construction plan submittal is because we need to know if what we're looking at when they turn in their construction plans and what we're gonna have them build, what we've agreed to that they're gonna build. And proportionality wise, there's kind of two pieces here. The first one is that a transportation impact analysis identifies those projects that mitigation may be required to happen for projects that are within the impact fee, which would have an impact fee reimbursement piece. It'll also identify those projects that aren't identified currently in the impact fee, and that those, if there is additional mitigation that's required, then those are considered extraordinary impacts. There's still a proportionality piece to that conversation, and not all money that is a part of an agreement is funded out of impact fees to address that proportionality issue. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay. And then all required street improvements shall be in accordance with the current city standard drawings, including pedestrian ramps, sidewalks, stormwater facilities, et cetera. So we talk a lot about downing. You keep hearing the word downing, but downing isn't a street that you see on this plat. So one of the things that's required in the now plan, not the vested plan, was that a road go in between Hutter and Carrington Street. And that road has been identified as downing. You can see it on the Madison Ranch subdivision that was approved 18 months ago, plus or minus. It comes in off of Hayden Avenue and comes to the backside west of this. And where it's going to wander to connect down into Prairie hasn't been seen by you folks yet. So we do identify the fact that it is a road that connects, and that in this particular subdivision, none of these houses that front on an internal road will have access onto a back road should it butt up against their backsides as a double loaded lot. All right. So the parks plan, just kind of try to catch what I wrote over here. The analysis goes on, talks about typical sections, how big you're building the roadway. There is a condition in the analysis that when we get to it, that the engineer is identifying that honeysuckle, kind of goes down and around that well site and encumbers onto the school property. Again, they do have an MOU that was part of your packet, but that relationship and how they're going to work with the school to work out access to the lift station or the roadway development, I don't believe is completely ironed out. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. It's not between me and them. But it was thought that they could build the whole road to be 40 feet curb to curb. And ultimately, that will be the build out. But our standards identify that if you're the landowner adjacent to somebody else that's got to build the other half of the road, that your minimum required pavement width, the area that you drive upon, has to be 24 feet of pavement. So that is the minimum that we would, to meet the standards of approval for two-way travel, that they would be required to build, in addition to their curbs, swales, multimodal path, et cetera. Okay? So parks and streets in comprehensive plans. Parks and streets in comprehensive plans. Under the old code that existed prior to Imagine Hayden, they were pretty much written in silos a bit. They didn't all happen at the same time, so the comprehensive plan got written, and then the parks plan or the transportation plan got amended, and so things didn't always jive entirely. On page 22 and 23 of your staff review, you'll see both of these. And it identifies two of the items out of three of the items out of the comprehensive plan in the first paragraph. And it identifies the fact in all three of those, both goals and the comprehensive plan, that the vision of providing safe connectivity between parks, schools, and other non-motorized facilities is really the theme that occurs throughout. And Mr. Kimball is absolutely correct in the fact that that is not shown well on the transportation plan. It has some multimodal areas. And in the parks plan, it kind of shows that greenway connectivity from paths on Prairie and up through parks and connecting parks to other parks. He's correct. But the parks plan is pretty specific in the fact that you have to make that connectivity within a 1.5 mile radius of a community park, which is pretty much the entire subdivision has to be connected. The reason that I showed you the drawing on page 21 is only as a matter of reference. Mr. Kimball alluded to the fact that other folks in this area have projects that are coming potentially forward. And so when staff looks at this, they have to look at it from twofold. You know, does it meet the intent of the parks plan, transportation plan, comp plan? Which I'm not saying it doesn't, it absolutely could. And as it's making those connectivity points, is it also going to work for future connectivity of future projects that aren't going to be approved under the vesting code, but they're going to be approved under the codes that exist today? So as long as those connections can be adequately met by what Mr. Kimball is proposing to the drawing, similar to the drawing that's on page 21 of your staff analysis, then in staff's interpretation, I believe that he may have met that, but that is entirely up to you guys to figure out, to weigh those two together and make sure that he's met the intent of connecting schools, pedestrian ways, and parks. So provisions have been made for erosion control. We look at erosion control everywhere. The prairie is not flat. So we like to think it's flat, but it's definitely not flat. So he will review that at the time of construction plan submittal. Provisions have been made for gas, power, telecommunications, mailboxes, and similar infrastructure. So all dry utilities shall be installed underground. He did identify the fact that we have a plethora of telecommunications folks, but they will have to have at least one provider out there as part of their project. Mailbox locations are requested to be all on internal streets. We don't like people to stop on those collectors and arterials because it just makes nasty traffic. So we really, really like to push those into the internal streets for those mailboxes. But again, we are working with the U.S. Postal Service, and so it's kind of give and take. Provisions have been made for driveway locations. There are a plethora of things that we look at for access management, and those can also be found on page 21 of your staff review. But we did identify that there wouldn't be any individual access. So an individual residential lot would not have access to Carrington, Downing, Honeysuckle, Robeson, and Hayden Avenue. That means that additional commercial lot that's up there will have access onto Dunkirk, but not onto Hayden. And the area proposed for the subdivision is zoned for the proposed use, and the use conforms to other requirements found in this code. So if you go onward here.
Donna?
Yes.
And did you just say that that commercial lot in the northwest corner, the frontage is from the south?
His ingress egress is from the south. That's
Okay.
correct. So under the vesting code that it was part of the zoning code at the time that this was approved, and Hayden Code 1111 that identified the purpose of the zoning code, it says the zoning regulations as herein established have been made in accordance with a comprehensive plan for the purpose promoting the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the residents of the city of Hayden. They have been specifically designed to secure safety from fire and to protect life and property in areas subject to natural hazards and disasters, consider the congestion in the streets and consider public safety for vehicles and pedestrians, protect the sole source of Hayden's drinking water supply from contamination, avoid undue concentration of population and the overcrowding of land, ensure the development of land is commensurate with the physical characteristics of the land, ensure the important environmental features are protected and enhanced, facilitate the adequate provision and coordination of public services and facilities, and implement the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. The zoning regulations have been made with reasonable consideration, among other things, for the character of the district and its peculiar suitability for particular uses, and with a view of conserving the value of buildings and encouraging the most appropriate use of the land throughout the incorporated area of the city of Hayden. Which is pretty much what we're kind of looking at here. So, when this property came in 2020, the zoning map that existed then had commercial along Hayden Avenue and had single-family residential below, and today it has commercial along Hayden Avenue and single-family residential. So nothing has changed there. But as you noted, by the definition that I kind of read of the purpose, it points you back to the comprehensive plan. And so the comprehensive plan at that point in time, this was the future land use map. It was a 2-map piece, and it identified that along Hayden Avenue was commercial, which it is today, and south of there was residential. Density was identified in the comprehensive plan at that point in time, and that's showing in this area as green. And green was no more than 4 dwelling units per acre. And that's what's in their annexation agreement, and that's what they're proposing for their density, all in conformance with the then uses and what they're vested under. The special use permit was an allowed use, allowed under a special use permit. Today we call it a conditional use permit for multifamily to be in commercial. And since then, with changes in code, that conditional use was removed from commercial and added allowed outright under mixed use. So if it had come in today, it would have had a zone map amendment and then come forward with a subdivision. It did not. Everything that it's done to date is in accordance with the codes that it was brought in under. Okay? I'm not reading all those visions, and the whole vision and the goals, and I'm not going to do it. The bulk of your staff analysis, because of the way the goals and policies were written under the old comprehensive, makes you really appreciate the plan we have today, doesn't it? Because the goals and policies were written in such a fashion under the old comprehensive plan, I literally had to give you most of the comprehensive plan so that you could see what it was in context. So the vision begins on page 34 of your staff review. The goals and the policies that were kind of pulled out that met this subdivision are on pages 35 to 47. But as always, the ones I pick out are not always the ones you would. So the rest of it was all in the appendix in its entirety. This covered planning and administration, population, land use, natural resources, aquifer and water, hazardous areas, public services, sewer, water, solid waste, emergency services, transportation, housing, school facilities, recreation, economic development, community design, pedestrian and bicycle pathways, special areas or sites in the airport, Mr. Kimball did a good job with that, and property rights. Why so many? Because this has commercial component, multifamily, single family, residential, parks, pathways, streets. Kind of hit the whole thing. All right, and then condition number 8, or standard number 8, identifies that the developer has made adequate plans to ensure that the community will bear no more than its fair share of costs to provide services by paying fees, furnishing land, or providing other mitigation measures for off-site impacts to streets, parks, and other public facilities within the community. It's the expectation that in most cases, off-site improvements will be dealt with through agreements. So this project has a park development agreement. All of that development will be consistent with the agreement. They have mitigation consistent with Post Falls Highway District agreement or agreements. Mitigation consistent with off-site transportation mitigation if necessary. And then all infrastructure needs to be constructed per the adopted city code standards and plans. So then noticing, we identified that in 2020, we noticed 21 agencies. And then in 2024, we identified that we sent this to 27 agencies. The reason we sent it a third time is because we sent it the second time, and then Mr. Kimball realized that we didn't have everything updated, so we sent it a third time. It's really important that we get all of the agencies to have the opportunity to provide comments and address their concerns. So the Coeur d'Alene Airport requested an navigation easement in 2020. And again, as part of that apartment complex going in, the navigation easement was recorded in 2022. So if this gets approved, at the time of their final plat, they'll reference that. Post Falls Highway District requested the city to annex roadways all the way back in 2020. The city doesn't just go out and annex roadways. Somebody has to make an application to bring that forward. And that hasn't happened yet, as Mr. Kimball identified. Then there was a subsequent road agreement that was reached with the SUP, and then the comments that you received tonight on 4/15 of 24. Hayden Lake Irrigation District gave their full support of the subdivision in 20, and they reiterated that in March of 24. The Lakeland School District had interesting comments in 2020, but since 2020, the school district boundaries have changed, so this is no longer in the school district of Lakeland. So that doesn't apply. Idaho Department of Environmental Quality gave comments in relationship to what happens when the construction plans come in. That was in April of 24. And then again, Northern Lakes Fire Protection District had comments for future development, both in 2020 and in 2024. Kootenai County Sheriff's Office identified no concerns at this time in March of 24. Harbs, they had some force main construction details that they provided in 2020, and then they had some language that they wanted to add to the plat in March of 24. The Kootenai County Community Development Department had no comments or concerns in 20 and again in 24. Idaho Fish and Game had no comments in April of 24. And Idaho Department of Water Resources talked about water rights, well drilling, all in April of 24 as well.
Don, did you not have to notice Coeur d'Alene School District then?
We did, but we did not get, I have email correspondence back and forth, but no formal conversation. Yeah. We did get 3 public comments. They're in your board book. All 3 from residents of Hayden. And they all identified local services and infrastructure concerns. They talked about the aquifer and the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer and concerns there, enough so that they called out the Coeur d'Alene Press article and the
CREM 2.
program on CREM. And I did provide links in board book to both of those, just because they called them out by name. If you don't know what it was, it's kind of hard to figure out what they're talking about. And just because I'm a due diligence person, one of the folks that we do notice every time is the Spokane Aquifer Protection Board. I did reach out to the board and said, were there any concerns or red flags? And they asked if I had comments back from the water provider, and I said yes. And did I have comments back from Idaho Department of Water Resources? I said yes. And did I have comments back from Idaho Department of Environmental Quality? And I said yes. And they asked if there were any red flags, and I said no, and you have all of those comments. So they didn't have anything further to add. So I am also not reading all of these staff review conditions of approval. Just going to kind of bleep through them in summary. We have some general conditions of approval that are pretty much general, and we have them on almost every staff review that we provide to you. And that is that you're going to have some dedications and easements on the plat, joint stormwater potentially, requirements, easement, maintenance. In this case, they're proposing no joint stormwater except the standard swale, so that's good. They have to comply with permits from outside agencies, so that's Coeur d'Alene Airport, Panhandle Health District, Idaho Department of Environmental Quality, Hayden Lake Irrigation District, Northern Lakes Fire Protection District, and any other agency that could have been on here that, like Post Falls Highway District, for example, that had sent back comments that requested something in the comment, would have been listed here. I was going to say something, just went right out the door. Oh, DEQ. construction plans that come in from subdivisions get reviewed by the city, and then they get a once-over again from Department of Environmental Quality to make sure that you're meeting state requirements, both for sewer and for water. So it's not just us. Any conditions of approval will run with the land, so if the developer decides to sell off part of this tomorrow, these conditions run with that. We're requesting a phasing plan shall be required at the time of construction plan submittal. And that just helps us figure out, A, which phase are they actually building first? And, do they have items in that phase that are required to be constructed, not a part of that phase, but in order to make that phase work? So that's what that's about. The park development shall be in conformance with the deferred park development agreement. The H8 sewer basin infrastructure. So I will go back and reread this sewer will serve letter. I know it's very specific about the fact that you can't get building permits issued or COs until that approval of infrastructure. I believe you may have some merit as far as moving that around and changing that condition. I would propose that Fonda and I would make some, should the Planning and Zoning Commission wish to allow them to build in the H7 basin ahead of the H8 basin, that you would instruct us to wordsmith this and bring it back as part of the written decision, a written recommendation. 8. And so the same thing, I guess, would go for 7 in this case. So this whole, 7 is pretty much 7. So that's just prior to the execution of the construction improvement agreement that would have the H8 sewer lift station in it.
I think number 9 is the other one that might get modified a bit.
I think it's
It was 6.
and 9. So I think 8, I think that what we're trying to get to with 8 is that we need to maintain that we have permanent access to the lift station. And if we can figure out where the lift station is actually going to go, this may change. So I think we might have to rework this one so that it addresses the fact that we have to have that permanent access. Mr. Kimball is correct. He did provide documentation that the folks have all agreed to kind of work with that roadmap and make sure that it all works. And I think we're going to try to get it so it's a recordable document, so it kind of runs with the land and everybody agrees to that. So I think we probably could rework condition number 8. I again have to clarify that with our Public Works Department and our city engineer. And then a sewer technical analysis shall be completed prior to the construction plan submittal for the H8 basin and the lift station. That's still true.
So for those particular conditions of approval, should the commission decide to approve, recommending approval of this to council, simply in your motion, you could add language that city staff has authority to rework the language of these consistent with the applicant's concerns that they brought up tonight before it goes to council.
So then condition number 9 is that we complete the transportation impact analysis peer review, and that just basically is a review to make sure that their assumptions make sense and that their analysis follows kind of our model and that we get to the same general answer at the end of the day. So it's not a rework analysis, it's just to address their assumptions and their conclusions and how they got there. Not done by staff, it's sent out. And they do pay to have that reviewed as a pass-through cost. Condition number 11, that's just going back to, again, all the lots and access. And I said, with the exception of, that the well lot can have access onto Honeysuckle Avenue, and that the lift station may have an access point to North Downing Lane or to West Honeysuckle Avenue, because we don't know the exact location of where that's at. 12, construction submittal shall include those requirements identified in Hayden City Code 12.6. 12A is actually a two-parter. I just got to go find the conditions of approval because I wrote them in summary.
Page 51, start on page 49.
All right, so 12A identifies that Carrington Street shall be built to a C2 typical section. when it's all said and done at the end of the day. That's what it'll look like. I agree with Mr. Kimball that Carrington Street dedication has occurred, so I do not have problems striking that if the Planning and Zoning Commission directs us to do so. The second part of that says that Carrington Street and Hayden Avenue intersection improvements are identified within the transportation impact analysis. As necessary improvements, however, at the time of this staff analysis, no peer review of the assumptions or conclusions of the analysis have been completed. I would like to leave that in there, just as a matter of note or whatever. Because, you know,
12D,
12, that was 12A2 is what that was.
too, if you want to leave that.
All right, so then B identifies that the portion of Downing Street serving the lift station shall be constructed within the first phase of the subdivision construction in accordance with the typical section. That's another one that Mr. Kimball asked us to kind of revise, and so that would go along with the sewer of the previous. And then 12C identifies that Dunkirk shall be fully constructed. So Dunkirk, if you drove out there, you'd think, oh, it's almost there, but it's not. So it's almost there. It's like what, 2/3, 3/4 of the way constructed, Dunkirk? Yeah, probably. So this is just saying that Dunkirk Avenue has to be fully constructed. The south half has to go in, or third that's left over, whatever. Okay, so 12D talks about Honeysuckle Avenue shall be constructed to a C1 typical section. So at the end of the day, once both sides get built, it'll be a 40-foot wide curb-to-curb stretch. He wants us to strike that the Honeysuckle Avenue shall dedicate a 50-foot half width. That has happened, so I don't have a problem striking that. That did happen as part of the annexation agreement.
So Donna, can I ask, if it has already been satisfied, then what harm is it to leave it in? Is there?
You don't usually like to have extra conditions in the middle of your analysis, of your staff review if it's already been completed. You're looking at
Isn't it just a
conditions that
simple
happen
check
in
it
the
off?
future. I would leave
No,
it
we would
alone.
remove it. We would physically remove it as a condition in your written decision. And it would
Okay.
not be a condition that you recommend to council should you recommend approval of this
Okay,
subdivision.
okay.
It's cleaner if it's already been satisfied. It's
Sure.
just the timing of how everything happens. Sometimes and the amount of time that we wanted you to have the ability to review the staff report also kind of played into the timing of these pieces, so.
Okay. Thank you.
So in line with the fact that Mr. Kimball has requested the 24 feet, which is the minimum that is required, then I would request Planning and Zoning to allow staff to rework 12D, the last bullet,
D2.
which is numbered weird, 4-1.
D41,
Yeah,
12D41.
correct. So Robeson Avenue, they own both sides, so they're going to build the whole road to an AC1 typical section. Hayden Avenue has already been built to its typical section, and it was done so with the apartments. G, the developer shall be required to construct all internal streets in conformance with those ST 111 and 111A requirements. And erosion control measures shall be put in place. The developer shall use Hayden sanitary sewer in accordance with the adopted sewer master plan. We'll need some kind of concurrence at the time of construction plan submittal that identifies where the mailboxes are going to get plopped. That always seems to get pushed, and so we really have been trying to get folks to get on top of it earlier than later. So there's a sewer line from Pearl Harbor Loop to Anzio Loop, and that's located in that open space tract. So Mr. Kimball had a way better picture than I did, but I'm gonna go punt here. So is this these two? Right through here. So that's why the width of that, when he says, you know, it's gonna be 30 or 40 feet wide, is because that width varies depending on how deep that sewer goes. Because the deeper you go, the wider a trench, I believe, that you need in order to get down to the sewer in case you have to fix it. And you don't want to be hampered by fences that are like, right here. So that's what is going to trigger how wide that's going to go. All right. So as you note here, we note that that's going to be an open space track, and we identify that there could be multimodal pathways in this location. We just have to make sure that the width of those pathways meet the pathway requirements, both for the sewer policies as well as for the pedestrian policies. So whichever one, you have to meet all of those conditions. And the maintenance of that open space tract falls onto the property owner or homeowners association. So then both the existing well house site as well as the H8 lift station site shall comply with Hayden City Code with respect to site development. So any building permits or site permits, access right-of-way permits, those all have to happen with those two sites, and they have to be brought into compliance and conformance. And then landscape plans must conform to city code. All disturbed areas shall be stabilized with dryland grass or other approved BMP. And the reason that is you don't like to have your prairie soils blow into the, hitherlands. It's a bad thing. So under landscaping plans, which is on page 53 of your staff review, it identifies that landscaping for individual lots will happen at the time of the building permit. It identifies that the future city park will happen as a part of the park plan in conjunction with the park construction. It identifies when street frontage happens in greenway tracks or in those green tracks that were identified in green spaces. Those will happen at the time of that phase of the subdivision, and then those tracks will be deeded at the time of final plat and approval of infrastructure to the HOA, separate deed. Talks about greenways consistent with the parks master plan versus green belts consistent with the subdivision code and the transportation plan. We've talked about that. You guys can decide if he's met that requirement or not and when those would go in. So if they are putting those in, those happen at the time of subdivision construction, not at a future development for those greenway areas. And then we've talked about the multimodal pathways consistent with the transportation plan and the parks plan. So as identified, those are the staff recommended conditions that all the way go up there. And then starting at 16, there are requirements that were requested to be imposed at the time of this approval that were requested by other agencies. This is just kind of our tracking mechanism. So Northern Lakes Fire Protection District had requirements in a letter. So did Post Falls Highway District. The navigation easement was already recorded that the Coeur d'Alene Airport requested. So that's just having us follow up, make sure it lands on a plat. And then conditions 19 and 20 is really hard to enforce. So I don't want to be the guy that has to try to figure out how to enforce 20. So we're suggesting to just pretty much strike 20 and let 19 stand on its own. And so the developer shall record an easement acceptable to the Hayden Area Regional Sewer Board. So they're going to go to their board and work out some easement language and record it as a separate document and reference it on their plat. And the gist of the request from Harbs is that they're granting an easement that identifies that their property may have some fumes or odors or air pollution or adverse impacts or conditions or nuisances related to the fact that they're near a wastewater treatment facility. An associated land application area. We're not suggesting that that verbiage has to be in there. We're just giving it context. So again, they're going to go to somewhere else, figure out how to meet that requirement, and then put the condition on the plat. And then 21 is similar to that. The Hayden Lake Irrigation District has asked that for all their water lines that run cross-country, that means they're not running in a street. They're running through land somewhere. That the developer shall record a 20-foot wide water line easement over the water line that's going cross-country. There's some sample motions. They're similar to the one that are at the end of your executive summary of your project. And I did not list the conditions of approval. I would prefer that the standards of approval, I would prefer that you reference those that are in your executive summary because they are long, number one. And number two, they're just slightly different than standard ones, so. Okay? Do you have questions for me?
So I do, when a subdivision goes in, especially one that's as large as this, does the city have any mechanism to make sure that those lots that are developed but aren't yet built on are maintained?
It's part of the nuisance code, and we call them up and say, you need to go mow. Yeah.
Okay, because it's so large, I know they're going to have that, and there's going to be residents that go, how come I have to take care of mine and you don't take care of
Right.
yours?
It's all part of the nuisance code.
Perfect,
Yep.
that's what I needed to know, thank you. Yeah, my paper copies are now all so mixed up that I'm like, where did my papers go? So, okay. Did you make note of all of the numbers? Do you need all of the numbers of each thing that you want altered? Or could we make a motion that,
You still have public hearing.
oh, we do?
Yeah, you get to hear from the public.
It's a
Yeah.
little- yeah. Okay.
Do you have any more questions for me?
I don't.
Okay. Do we have anybody wishing to speak at this time?
I don't, did you fill out a form?
Signed up on the list.
So there's a little form.
Or because I'd like to speak as well.
Can I take 5 to use the bathroom?
You guys want to take a short break?
Yeah, while they're filling theirs out,
Go to the bathroom.
could we?
I'm gonna take a short,
I would agree with that, yeah.
restroom break, a little 5-minute break.
While they're filling their things out.
You guys give that.
Anyone who wants to offer comments regarding the subject case, please submit a completed form located on the table by the entrance doors. The forms must have your name, address, date, and whether you just want to testify in support of, opposed to, or are neutral. Anyone planning to speak must do so at the podium so your remarks can be heard in the recording system. All questions and comments will be directed to the commission, not the applicant. The applicant will have the opportunity to answer questions and offer a rebuttal after all public testimony is completed. All speakers will need to state their name and address for the record before they begin speaking. I will call first those supporting the application, then those uncommitted, and finally those opposed to the application. Please note the commission is not here to answer questions. So first I have Mr. Craig Fry, and he is neutral.
Thank you. My name is Craig Fry. I live at 3510 West Bean Avenue, Hayden, Idaho. I've heard a lot of different things this evening, and I've got some concerns. I keep hearing Honeysuckle Avenue being proposed. I'm guessing that they're talking about this area here, which is Honeysuckle Avenue on the other side of Atlas Road. Over here, it's Harvest Avenue, and here it's Bean Avenue. One of the concerns I have is, are they renaming the streets? That's happened to me once already in my lifetime living here. I currently live in this parcel right here. One of my concerns is if this is being opened up and brought completely through, there are currently 10 households that live in this area that live on this dead-end street. We have 170 apartments, houses being built. If half of those, 100, maybe 80, are now traveling Honeysuckle, the new Honeysuckle, all the way through, that's a tremendous amount more additional traffic on Bean Avenue. I don't think Bean was constructed for that amount of traffic. The other thing that I heard is the city of Hayden's requirements are for an 85-foot right-of-way on those kinds of streets. It was pointed out that Honeysuckle would have to be one of those requirements. The current at Bean Avenue, from Atlas Road to the edge of my property, is a 40-foot right-of-way. From my property to the dead-end portion, it's a 50-foot right-of-way. What happens, is that going to become an 85-foot right-of-way, and who's paying for that? Will there have to be sidewalks, grassy swells, those sorts of things put in if it becomes the 85-foot right-of-way? Another thing that I had heard this evening was U.S. Postal Service not wanting post office mailboxes on major roads, such as the new proposed location. Our current mailboxes are approximately here. They used to be on Atlas Road. We moved them off of Atlas Road because of a fatality. And that was before Atlas was improved to the condition it is today. The other requirement the post office had was they had to have a spot where they could turn around. So one of the individuals that lives here has a circular driveway. That's the reason the post office mailboxes are located where they currently are. I think that's going to be a big concern if that becomes a major right-of-way, because you're requesting that they not be put on any of these other right-of-ways. The traffic, that's a real concern of mine. It really is. Currently, the Atlas Elementary School lives on the corner of Atlas and Bean, Honeysuckle, where that junction happens. And I understand parents doing this, a lot of them do. They will drive up Bean, turn around, stop along Bean, go pick up their children, and then leave. And even this evening, I mean, they do have lights controlling the traffic during those times that children are arriving and leaving. And I think that's a great idea. It's at 20 miles per hour. And I see that the police department is probably getting some of their revenue because there are a lot of people that don't follow that requirement. I'm just very concerned about the additional traffic, the additional amount of people that's going, you know, I understand growth is happening. And when I first moved out here, none of the other subdivisions were any around me. strawberry fields, blueberry, none of that. That was all fields. It was very nice. I know I can't stop growth. I'm just very concerned about it. And I do have my grandkids come occasionally, and we have gone from my place to the Atlas Elementary School so we can make use of the playground. If this becomes a major arterial, that's going to be a dangerous spot. I don't know that we'll be able to do that. Some things that I think need to be brought forth, and as I say, I'm just concerned about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Mario Marchetti is against the proposal.
My name is Mario Marchetti. I live at 3861 Bean Avenue. That's this piece of property right here. I've been told that they're going to take 15 to 20 feet of my property. These fences have been here for over 25 years. Back when they were put in, there was a prescriptive easement was 5 years, as the attorney knows. In 2006, it was changed to 20 years. So those fences are legal boundaries now. That, like the applicant said, that we'll just take that county land. It was a carriage easement through there, but they never used, it was never established. And it's been fenced for over 25 years. And so, and being there on the edge of that, I know I can't stop this from happening, but I don't want them to keep me from accessing the back part of my property. And I do that from right along here. So take 20 feet away from me. That is the city, typically, when they do a city project take county land with it, or do things on county land. I mean, it's not right. So if you want to do something with your city, in the city limits, within the city limits, keep it within the city limits and leave the county alone. This fence line here that goes along Carrington, all the way here, has been there for over 25 years. Way over 25 years. So it's a prescriptive easement now. So I don't want my property taken so that they can put their development in. This development is going to cost you guys a lot of money. They're going to make millions and millions of dollars on it. But everybody knows that residential doesn't bring in a lot of revenues for the city. It costs you a lot because of police and fire. So I just request that you guys don't cut them any slack on the stuff that you're supposed to be protecting your citizens from, just so they can get this thing done. So that's my argument. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you care to offer rebuttal?
Commissioner Ray Kimball again for the record. Let's see here. Okay, so first I'm going to speak a little bit to some of Donna's comments with regards to parks and connectivity. I think the only thing really that we really have any objection to with regard to the conditions of approval for the greenways is the actual dimension. So the 30-foot dimension called out in the code is very specific to specific corridors. It's not applicable in this case, but I do want to point out that it is very important to us to provide connectivity to and from the parks, from the neighborhoods, also to the school property to the south. We've provided that. We're very, very intentional in ensuring that there are pathways along all these green areas here. So we have a 10-foot pathway along here. There's 10-foot pathways along Honeysuckle. There's 10-foot pathways on Robeson. And all of them lead to and from the park, as well as providing access to the property that's owned by the school district, which we think will eventually become either a high school or a middle school or an elementary school or some combination thereof. So we do believe that we've provided the connectivity that is required by the comprehensive plan and the Parks Master Plan by providing those pathways in those locations that provide safe pedestrian connectivity. And that's in addition to all of the sidewalks that are in front of every house and straddling each street as well. So it's not as if there's just kids walking down the street to get to the park. There's plenty of connectivity. There's sidewalks, there's pathways, and all of it spiderwebs out from the park and very strategically in accordance with the master plans. And to be quite honest, in conformance with today's master plan when it comes to making sure that people can get to and from the park. So we've met that requirement. With regards to the condition number 20, like Donna said, from Harbs, that was a little bit of an overstep on their end. They're welcome to ask for it, but it's not responsive to any of the standards of approval. So we'd request you strike it. Not only is it not responsive to any standard of approval, but it's incredibly hard to, as Donna said, for the city to enforce. And of course, with regards to Donna spoke a little bit about the road agreement that we provided and that the city would like to do some wordsmithing. The only thing, and I want to make sure that this is on the record for the staff, because I think some wordsmithing is fine. Running with the land is something that gets a little sticky because it'll end up on a title report for someone buying a house. And it's not really applicable in that case. And it's going to stay there forever.
Then then I have a question. Then what's your proposal for making sure if the developer sells off the land that the next developer follows the same obligations?
I think we can figure that out.
All ears.
And so, one, I think city policy and city code today requires it, that you have to line up with the adjoining roads. That is your transportation master plan speaks to that, as well as your existing standards, your current standards. If there was some language in there that said something to the effect of so I'm a civil engineer and a land surveyor, I'm not an attorney. So, but if there's something in there that says something to the effect of that the condition or disagreement ceases upon subdivision of the land.
A sunset clause?
A sunset clause, if you will, attorney speak, then that would be acceptable. With regards to Mr. Fry's comments, his concerns with regards to mailboxes are well-founded. We always make sure that we put our mailboxes for the safe, in locations that are safe, not only for the residents, but for the mail carriers. So we do our best, absolutely 100%, keep them off of arterials and collectors. And the mail and the post office has a philosophy of putting together these, we call them gang boxes, but they're the cluster box units, the CBUs, and we put them all in one location so that the mail carrier shows up and there's 5 or 6 of these things in a row, and they just fire them all in there in one spot. It's really efficient for them. It's good for them. I can't speak to that with regards to, with Bean, and if you noticed, and I don't know if you caught it, but in the highway district condition, or the highway district agreement, the highway district does not want to open Bean, the end of Bean, from this subdivision. So if Bean were to ever in order for Bean to be open, the highway district would have to open the end of it because it's their jurisdiction. And so I'm gonna kind of jump back out here because I think, there we go. So there will not, it'll be blocked off. The highway district has said that they're gonna block off this part, the end of Bean. So, and that's fine. So honeysuckle or bean, I don't really care what the name is. I don't know if anyone really does. Excuse me. No one on our side of the table cares. And whatever the city wants to do with regards to this part of honeysuckle, or this part of the street, that's completely up to the city. And addressing is typically done by the county, and street names are changed by the county staff, and designated by the county. As Donna said, a lot of these streets are kind of placeholders. Street names are placeholders sometimes, and they go through county approval. You will see in an upcoming application, that is, hopefully in the next couple months, you will see a connection of honeysuckle all the way out to Hutter. So that will, I know this is, Donna has shown you what's already existing and what we're proposing. There is a much larger plan for this that all fits with the city's transportation master plan. It all fits together. All the pieces are put together. This is why the requirement of, or the agreement between the landowners, really it's just like, okay, yeah, no problem. We'll do it. We're doing it anyway. That's our philosophy. So, and so because Bean won't be opened by the highway district at the end of it, there won't be any additional traffic down Bean, so that shouldn't be a concern. And so with regards to Mr. Marchetti's concern, with regards to the 20-foot right-of-way that was dedicated in 1911, it is my understanding that the legal principles of adverse possession do not apply to public right-of-way, and your attorney can confirm that. So the location of a fence, if it goes into a public right-of-way, does not mean that if you fence it off for 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 or 100 years, doesn't mean it's yours. It is still dedicated to the public. And so what I can say is that location, his property is right in this vicinity here. And so even if that fence line moves to the current right-of-way line, that he will have access off of Carrington, any place along his frontage in order to access the back of his property. So he will have that ability in order to do that. And of course, that is highway district right-of-way right now. And so it's not under the jurisdiction of the city. And so any access that he needs to get, he'd obviously have to talk to the highway district, should he want that. And that concludes my rebuttal. If you have any additional questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Anyone on the commission?
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
In regards to the battleground subdivision plans, just to reiterate, there was never a part of those plans to connect Honeysuckle to Bean.
Correct. So the highway district has told us that they will not open that because Mr. Fry's correct. Bean was not built for that kind of traffic. That's exactly why the highway district, because we are connecting on Robeson, that's why the highway district has required us to do a pavement overlay. So both Robeson and Bean, according to the highway district, are triple shot roads, which is basically 3 layers of chip seal. And so it's probably 3 layers of chip seal on top of topsoil, if I know how those old roads were built. So, well, gravel with a whole bunch, with about 17 years of oil, or 700 years of oil, for dust control, beat into them, and then chip sealed. So, that's why in our agreement with the highway district that Robeson, will be paved, we'll do an overlay, to make sure that it has the typical cross-section that'll handle any additional pavement or any additional traffic. And then highway district said, nope, shutting off Bean,
Got it. So all the connectivity will be north, west, and south.
northwest and south.
Nothing east there.
East on Robeson.
Yeah,
But not on, but not on Bean.
Okay.
And it's probably important to note, because I think one of the gentlemen mentioned, the width of, you know, how wide Bean will be in the future. That only happens if a property annexes into the city, and that's a voluntary thing. So the city doesn't just go out and grab a property and say, you are in the city. City won't even do that with with an existing strip of right-of-way, much less somebody else's property. So, so that's 100% voluntary. If you don't want to be in the city, then you don't have to be in the city, and if you're not in the city, then you don't have to dedicate the right-of-way. And if a highway district or any sort of highway department comes in and says, no, we're going to widen the road, and we need that right-of-way, they have to buy it from you. So that's just how that works. And so, hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better about that.
I will disagree with you, but I'll comment that later.
So, but to that end, yeah, that's, hopefully that answers your question.
Point out to me which one's Robeson.
Robeson is right here.
So you are connecting there.
Yes, we are connecting Robeson right here. So you can see that there's about half of Robeson has already been developed, and it's in the city of Hayden. This is Gianna Estates, this is Gianna South.
Okay.
And so it'll connect, so it'll be paved, the pavement will extend from here to there. So it's a pavement overlay.
Thank you.
We should have any more questions? All right, the hearing is now closed. No further questions or comments will be allowed from the public. Commissioners, first of all, did anybody have any ex parte communications? I didn't ask that question.
No.
Okay,
No.
very good. Do you wish to proceed or schedule deliberations for another date?
Motion to proceed.
Proceed, okay. Proceed. Anybody have any comments? Joel, you want to start?
I have a question for Donna. I just
She can ask a question of staff right now, yeah.
So that, where the development is going, that's been annexed into the city.
Yep.
It's funny, I just said, I wish we had a city-county overlay on that so you
That's
could see it.
exactly where I was going. Exactly where I was going.
She can pull it up.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Might be like my second or third slide.
There it is. Good job.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
So everything
Yellow
that's
would be
in
city.
here is in the county,
Okay,
this is city.
okay.
okay.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Joel, any comments?
One thing I've kind of been worried about is the construction vehicles and everything going on Hutter and Hayden. That's a very small road. And then also shutting down parts of Hayden, I'm assuming.
They can't answer questions right now, so.
No, I'm just saying,
Okay.
that's just a concern of mine is all the construction vehicles going in there, but, I can't think of anything else at the moment.
Mary?
I think that I especially wanted to see the city-county overlay because we talk about a development and it's, you know, meeting standards of approval and whatnot, but it's not in isolation of the whole area. And so it's important to see what it affects as we look at the standards of approval. Yeah, that was my comment.
Keith? Good. No? No comments? No?
Anybody have a motion?
Well, I don't have all of the numbers of things.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could I, get you guys to go through each of you and tell me how you've met the standards of approval, so there's some findings to this?
Yes.
Absolutely.
That isn't it.
No, I.
Keith, would you like to start?
This was probably the biggest packet that I've seen in 2 years. And it required, I came in and met with Donna and went over it. And so in talking with Donna previous to this meeting, I got all my questions answered there. And so I feel like it meets the standards of approval based on any additional information from the public and from the developer. Nothing swayed my opinion from all the questions that I had for Donna when I met with her.
Can you articulate for the record some of the concerns that you have that Donna satisfied for you so that we have a more robust record?
Yeah, I was concerned that, I mean, I'm a citizen, and I volunteer my time to do this. This isn't a paid position. And I do this because I want to keep my eye on the government and make sure they're treating people fairly. And the bottom line is that when you have a person that has a piece of property here, another person that has a piece of property here, if this person likes seeing the deer in this property, but this guy has a right to develop it. So it's not fair to say, oh, this guy likes the deer. Sorry. That's not, I mean, we have to watch out for all the citizens, not just me or anyone else. And so I feel like I don't like to see growth either. I like the small town feel of Hayden, and it's just getting bigger and bigger, and I don't like that. But what I don't like worse is I don't like people having their right to develop their land taken away from them. They bought it as an investment. They didn't buy it for somebody else to enjoy the deer on their land. So anyway, those are the types of concerns that I have, and it's a tough deal. It's not fun to you're going to make somebody sad no matter what you do, and the bottom line is you know, the only thing you can do is administer the rules consistently, and I feel like that's what's been done. The problem that I had and why I had questions and came in earlier is because this has been going on for so long that it's under two different standards. And so I was more concerned with that and making sure that the standards that were in place 2 years before I even became a commissioner, that I had some type of understanding of those. And based on those are the standards that it meets.
Thank you.
For myself, one of my concerns, looking at the old standards and the new future land use map, seeing that area is almost, it's pretty much the exact same. There hasn't been any big deviation there. One of the concerns was with your road, what happened to that. So finding out that that's not being bridged, and that's not going to turn into a major arterial, that is good to hear. I had heard in previous public hearings or previous open forums, somebody who lives on the north side of the road was concerned about the lack of parks because they had bought into that community that was developed right on the other side of the road with this idea of this park being put into place. And they were frustrated because that park wasn't going to be developed for years and years, and their kids were going to be grown up by then. So to find out that some of the concessions being made with this development is that they're putting an emphasis on building that park in the first couple phases is rare, and it also benefits the community. So hearing that, and hearing all the other concessions being made and hearing all the other ways that the developer is trying to be, or trying to do good, or to do right by the community the best they can in the midst of, you know, turning an open prairie into a development, you know, like you said, it's, not everybody wins here with what everybody would hope for when you're trying to keep growth from happening. All of my concerns were alleviated tonight. So that's my comment on the whole thing.
All right. So I come from the Parks Commission originally, and I like that you guys are gonna, just like a fellow commissioner stated, that I like that you guys are gonna be finishing the park with the first phase. That's very nice. And then also, when I was with the Parks Department, we had to go and listen to the citizens about what they wanted in these parks. And I saw on your list that you have here in the packet, some amenities that you guys are gonna put in there. And it's fantastic to see, because I know some of our other parks haven't been able to handle it, so I appreciate that. Also, the access to houses not being outside of the neighborhood, it reminds me of a lot of the other neighborhoods in that local area. And I feel like it makes it clean and safe for people to access their homes. And then also working with the school district to be able to get that lift house?
Station.
Lift station, sorry. It's been a long night.
It's okay.
That lift station installed down there is nice, and that, if you guys do end up starting on the north end, since you already have that one established, that, I feel like that makes it so much better, so that's all I have.
So again, yes, as everyone now knows, this was a very large packet to go through, and I too did spend a lot of time in it. And I do feel like the conditions of approval have been met specific to the Greenway.
Did you mean standards of approval?
Standards of
I'm sorry.
approval, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That the Greenway requirements, the connectivity with the parks and the walkways, with the bike paths, the walking paths, the green space, with the width that it's promised to be built out as, with the connectivity within the subdivision to the park. I feel like the park and open space greenways is satisfied with the plan that that has been presented. I know there's always a concern about the aquifer and the health and safety of the area. I feel like the 4 dwellings per acre on sewer is protecting the aquifer, because it's the septics and the individual wells that pose risk to the aquifer. So I feel like that is a responsible density. I know it's difficult because the apartments in front are very high density. And so it looks like the whole thing is dense, but it really isn't. When you put the numbers all together, it really is 4 dwellings per acre, which is in accordance with the annex agreement. And as far as the other standards of approval and the conditions, I feel like the agency will serve letters with their particular requirements satisfies those other conditions. Am I correct in assuming that that does that?
The agency conditions?
Right, the agency conditions and their will serves, but that satisfies those standards of approval that this development has to go by. Because it was with the city engineer and those things being.
Yeah, that's not a question for me. That's an assessment you have to make.
I think so. I mean, I'm looking for some feedback on that.
I would agree with you.
Some comment on that. Okay. Anyways, yeah,
Okay.
those are my comments.
Right, I think those are all good points, and I think that, one of the big things here that we hear a lot on the commission is that the city, or citizens want to see growth pay for itself, and they want to do something about the traffic. And with this public-private cooperation, and they're basically doing improvements in lieu of their, impact fees, we're getting a park, they're putting in lights that we know private sector is much more efficient in putting in utilities than the government, just based on the requirements. So we're gonna get a little better bang for our buck, in regards to getting some lights on Hayden. The park will be improved more quickly. And, so I think, and then the other thing is, as well, that they have to follow the old annexation agreement of 4 homes per acre. We're actually gonna end up with less density than if they did it under the current zoning standards. So I think in all of those regards, they have met the standards and have served for the betterment of the public, so.
Right, well, and when you say that they're building, excuse me, those improvements in lieu of, they aren't really in lieu of, because they're committing to building them up to the same level that they would have paid in impact fees. So I think it's important that the public understand they're not getting a break because they're putting those in.
And we're getting a better deal.
And we are getting, our tax dollars are going much further because we are not having to put in as much. Correct.
Okay. Anyone else?
I just wanted to make a little bit of comment on the staff, recommendations. I think that there was, and I don't remember which one it was. I think that we're good with taking out the things that have already been completed and allowing the staff and legal as needed to wordsmith and work on things like them being able to build where this lift station
H7.
7 is.
Rework the conditions.
Rework
Subject to our
those.
written approval.
Right, but not, I mean, I think that the staff did a lot of work in coming up with their conditions. And I'm nervous about us missing something that they're saying, yeah, we're good with this, but not with this one, kind of thing. So we probably need to go through
So-
those if we're gonna cherry pick them out. I'm concerned about
So
that.
you're related to the sewer question, those are conditions 6, 7, 8, and 9. Rhonda can correct me if I'm wrong.
And then there was,
I think it's just 6, 7, and 8, actually.
and then there was something in 12. Oh, not 9.
not 9, just 6, 7, and 8,
6, 7, and 8.
and 12,
that was-
A1 and D1, that was the takeout.
12A1 and D1,
1 and
strike.
1. Okay.
Don't forget,
We were
requirements.
going
for
to,
Greenbelt
going
requirements, was
to
that D1?
amend in 12D. Let's just say we're gonna work on 12D.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it makes me nervous to be, I don't wanna tie you,
Oh, that's all right. We'll just work
Well,
on 12D.
but,
I think the one decision point that is going to be important, even if it's just in deliberations, to hear from the commission, and Commissioner Howard's the only one that's alluded to it, is whether or not you feel like the greenway connectivity is sufficient as presented.
okay.
So I'd like to hear some discussion on that.
Does anyone have a concern with?
I don't know, it seemed adequate to get people to the park and from the school.
And I
Well,
think,
and north of Hayden as well.
well, and what I was gonna say is, with the roundabout, not only it being more expensive in the short term,
It's harder to cross.
it's harder to cross.
Yep.
So having a stoplight, you get a designated walk signal. Yeah.
So on the walkways, so if they're 10 feet wide, I think that, you were on the parks. So what is the intent of the greenway? How is that different than the 10-foot bike and walking areas? Can they be the same thing?
Are you talking about,
Put your park hat back on. That's what I'm asking.
so are you talking about the sidewalk that's between the swell and then the green strip and then the fence?
Right, but when they're talking the walkways, they're talking wider than a typical,
I think that's the green belt, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
like
what
the
I'm
ones they have in
asking.
all the other
Can
neighborhoods
that-
around there.
Yeah, can that be considered the same thing?
I think so, yeah.
You were still sitting on the commission, would you say that? That's what I'm asking.
I would, because we had concern over the grass and tree areas there and stuff.
Okay,
So I think so.
okay. Anybody else?
But, yeah. I like the connectivity and the greenways and whatnot, because it reminds me of the neighborhoods to the east of there across Atlas. It looks exactly like those, so I mean, if those were okayed and approved, then so should this, because it looks like it's just stamped and applied to over here.
Okay,
So,
okay.
So it's got the same green belt standard.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay,
exactly.
that's what we're looking for, is the Greenbelt standard working there.
Okay. Counselor, are you good with
And
this?
then this one,
So were we
removing condition 20.
We're removing 20?
No,
That's what that request was.
they've requested to remove it entirely.
Oh, to
We've
remove it
modified,
entirely?
Donna modified it for you for tonight.
Yeah, I'd rather.
Yeah, and just use their language and. I mean, you've got to let people know that there's a possibility it could
Stink.
have some smells. So at least they're notified.
So is this the one? No. No, it's that it runs with the property,
Runs with the land was the
Runs with the
other.
land.
was, uh,
runs with the land.
That was the ability to transfer, like, not just state, if it changes developers, that all these requirements run with the land. And he was asking that there's some type of
You said-
sunset clause on it.
Sunset clause, how would that, and would we need that in a motion?
No, you don't need that in a motion, and it's not related to 19 and 20.
Yep,
It was completely unrelated.
yep.
No, but is it related to the one that talks about all of the conditions being related?
No. It was.
Because
We identify that we're going to amend 6, 7, and 8 based on discussion.
And those were the ones?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.
So if you notice in your staff report on page 53, conditions 19 and 20 are very different than what is proposed up here.
Okay, so we should use the
So-
proposed 19 and 20 as
The-
opposed.
Yes,
Yep,
as
okay.
opposed to what's in your staff report.
Okay,
Okay,
the amended
You see
19
that?
and 20.
you got it? Okay, are we all?
Are we ready for a motion? Who would like to
Okay.
take a stab at it?
You'll help walk me through. Make sure I don't mess it up.
You can do it.
Okay. So, well, there was some language in here too, wasn't there? Do you want me to use the language that's in
It's
here?
up on the screen.
Oh, you got it, thank you. I don't need those then. Okay. I move to recommend approval of BZE 20-0193 Battleground Phased Subdivision request with staff recommendations of approval with,
Staff recommended conditions.
pardon?
He said it right. Staff recommended conditions of approval, but you'll say, as modified in our deliberations here tonight.
Right, staff recommended conditions of approval with modifications as we've discussed here tonight to conditions 6, 7, and 8. Is that?
You don't have to number them out. She'll pull it out of your deliberations and
Oh,
put it in your
good.
written findings.
Okay. Finding that the development is in accordance with the standards of Hayden City Code based upon testimony received at the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing and the record of the request.
Second.
We have a second.
Have your roll call.
Do we need any discussion of the motion? Before it's-
I thought you
Did I-
did great.
Did I cover
It's
everything?
really good, yeah, all right.
We have a second.
I'm glad I didn't have to number it all. That's what was making me so nervous.
Yeah, Fondo hit a home run on that one. That was like, good job.
Ready for roll call?
Commissioner Johnson, Aye. Commissioner Erickson,
Aye.
Chair Taylor,
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Howard.
Yes.
We've approved recommendation to council for approval. Okay, that is the end of that case. We will now, what do we have? You are free to go if you'd like. You don't have to stick around for the rest of this.
Gavel.
We have new business. Donna? Any new business? Any new business? No? Reports? Donnie? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
attending.
I hope
Thank you, sir.
feel better.
I do, knowing that Bean Avenue is not being, going through.
That's good.
Feel a lot better.
Yeah, because we would have shared the same concerns.
That was a concern of mine,
Our
and then when they
public
said that, I was like,
hearing.
okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
We were gonna have at the next meeting, we are not.
Okay,
We're working on getting a public hearing ready to go for your second meeting in November.
What's that date?
Whatever date that is. 3rd. Monday.
Should be early. Something like that.
It's the 18th, I think.
18th?
Yeah,
Good, I'll be in
and
town.
I will be gone that night.
oh, good.
I will be here.
So, I need to make sure I have a quorum on November 18th
Okay.
before we notice, because it's really ugly to notice and then not have a meeting.
And do we have a docket for that yet, or no?
We do,
Okay,
hopefully.
yep,
Should know next week, probably.
okay.
And then hopefully, we've got 2 more that are potentially coming forward in December.
Okay.
We're working through those.
So we will have a first meeting in November.
We will, it'll be a calling meeting, assuming I get this figured out.
December.
So.
No, a
in
call-in meeting, the
November.
first one in November.
First one in November.
It's October.
It's not a public hearing, but we will have a call-in meeting, which means one of the 2 of you need to be
Okay,
here.
I'll be in Vietnam. Maybe I can call in.
I think we'll
Okay.
handle that
All
one.
right.
We'll still need a quorum in order to approve the minutes
We need
and
3
approve
of
the
us.
written recommendation though, so. All right.
Anything else? We are adjourned.
Sorry,
Oh,
real quick. Donna, did you want to talk about the community meeting?
Yeah, good idea.
For Hayden
What's the
Canyon
next
Park,
day we
Helping
come
me
here?
out here. I need all the help I can
Cool.
get.
First meeting in November.
but it's a
is
call-in, you can call in.
4th.
Call it.
It'll be a
Just have to
call-in.
have one of
Four?
myself or, oh yeah, I can't call in.
On what day?
November 4th will be a call-in. November 18th is a meeting with a public hearing. If you're not going to be here on the 18th, let Donna know right away so she doesn't post for that public hearing.
I will be here.
So Hayden Canyon Park is going through the public, he's gonna yell at me. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm over here. Hayden Canyon, I'd really like to not be at this podium part of the night. Hayden Canyon Park is going through the public comment period. We're gonna have 3 open public charrettes where the public is gonna get to be able to participate. And the first one of those is happening next Wednesday, October 30th from 6 to 8. We're asking folks to just email us to let us know if they're gonna be here for it, and we are definitely looking for all the input that we can
It's
get.
18 acres.
It's 18 acres.
Is it on the lower or upper part of Hayden Canyon?
So if you were to drive north on Government Way and
Yep.
hang a right on the entrance into the charter school,
Uh-huh,
it's directly north of that.
North of charter
Driveway,
school.
soon to be roadway,
gotcha.
18 acres.
Okay,
So it's a good opportunity to have your thoughts of what you want the park to look like or the parts and pieces. Then they'll take that information back and kind of, mull through it and figure out what might work and come up with 3 potential ideas and bring those forward to the next public charrette.
Is it the part between government and the school, that treed section?
And then up just at the base of the toe of the hill that goes
Oh,
to the north.
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Donna, is there a mechanism for citizens to be able to give input if they already know that they can't be there?
Yes, so we're gonna have a spot on the website that people
Right.
will be able to follow along as well as provide key information and input as well. We want this first public activity to occur first, and then it'll be involved. So we're hoping that with a real in-depth kind of, push, to have a relatively robust conceptual park master plan by the first part of February.
cool.
Lots of possibilities to participate, so please do so.
Okay,
What was the date of that?
October 30th from 6 to 8. And if you have places that you'd like to put up flyers, we have flyers that you could put up.
cool.
And you're requesting RSVP?
Yes, please. Just trying to make sure we got enough room. And it's here.
Cool. Okay,
Okay?
all right, I think we are adjourned.
Oh.
You liked that.